Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you for the very warm introduction. And considering the debate topics, as much as I like talking about Units 3 and 4 in our refurbishment project, I think I'll focus today on the energy trilemma of the World Energy Council, being in fact the advocate of my own cause, the role of nuclear energy in achieving the goals of the trilemma, namely energy security, equality, and environmental protection. Without a doubt, the world is undergoing an unprecedented transition in terms of energy generation, of the role of production capacity and energy sources. And the transition from conventional to so-called clean energy, if we're to comply with the terminology of the directives, is not quite new in itself. It was initiated around 2000 by various directives issued for the most part by the European Union. From the very beginning, if I remember correctly, paradigm shifts focused around two main directions, climate change and economic prosperity. And that's what we're focusing on this discussion and in the post-COVID environment as well. Nonetheless, the starting point was the implementation of different targets and measures with immediate effects after 2000. And they tended to kind of butt heads, so to speak, so that they loggered heads between themselves. The difference between a rigorous implementation and random adaptation is usually made by coherent energy policies and removal of various exclusions based on not so well substantiated criteria for certain admission of an action to the policy. The second major variable, and I'm referring here to the exclusive case of nuclear energy, has become a major challenge. In short, I think that there is a long list of countries that are very interested in achieving their decarbonization targets by including nuclear energy in their mix, which can use their time and resources to develop those capacities and have a cleaner, so to speak, or less carbon emitting backload of the energy system. Nuclear energy currently supplies 50% of low carbon energy produced in the European Union and over 30% of the total energy produced. Nonetheless, the Green Deal and the taxonomy regulation, i.e. more exactly the classification of energy sources that can significantly contribute to the achievement of decarbonization targets, are by themselves unprecedented pillars of energy paradigm shift. And that's where we're moving to from conventional to eco-industry. The taxonomy for sustainable financing, as you all know, is a tool for translating into practice and for guiding public and private investments in sustainable energy projects of the Green Deal, with a direct effect on current as well as future energy projects in the nuclear field. Green Deal does not mention nuclear power as a potential source of the future energy mix. And this is necessary to ensure decarbonization of the energy sector by 2050. Also, the taxonomy has a certain uncertain position with regards to the inclusion of nuclear energy. And this is where I want to focus a little bit more. The goal itself, which goes from clean source electricity to the farm to fork concept, is commendable and absolutely necessary. What we do and how we do it from the point of view of the equitable integration of all clean sources in order to achieve those highly ambitious targets is essential. And what is the key point here is technological neutrality. It has a major impact on decarbonization costs, the rate of decarbonization, investments, and implicitly, what do producers do with their cash accruals? Where do they focus their new investments, in what technology, and what do they decide to have as new generation capacities on their portfolios? Just think about it. The total cost of decarbonization right now varies between 139 and 633 billion euros. And that's the outlook until 2050. It's quite a large range. And as a direct cause, the excessive cost of decarbonization depends to a large extent on the role of nuclear energy and carbon capture and storage. The minimum cost of decarbonization can only be achieved through fair competition between all sources. And that means equal access to investments and to the same mechanisms to promote those investments in those to those technologies as with other sources. And I'm not going to name anyone. After signing the Paris Agreement, we're still far away from aligning with the 2-degree Celsius global warming threat. And that's because we're not looking at the facts. According to the International Energy Report for last year, not this year, 2019, the global consumption increased by around 2.3% in 2018, almost doubled as the increased rate of 2010. So we're having a higher and higher demand. Consequently, carbon emissions increased by 1.7 to 33.1 gigatons of CO2. Obviously, in 2020, there was a decrease in such consumption caused by the pandemic-related measures, and that was the temporary shutdown. But that's only a temporary decrease. This year is going to be an anomaly. It won't represent a trend. The upward trend, though, of consumption will continue, and implicitly so will that of CO2 emissions. Unless we manage to implement globally and by derived applicability at a regional and national level, the necessary framework for facilitating investments in all clean sources of energy. And this is the way in which we want to do it we should be done in such a way to allow for simultaneously long-term sustainability, economic return to investments and investors, and without impacting the energy system and the transmission system that exists currently within the system. So thus we will have either an extremely slow process, as we're looking at right now, which might be even canceled by the further increase of consumption, or we can gear up into a different speed with less bureaucracy, but better planning and better aligning of resources, which the market can do very well as long as the framework is stable and very rigorous. Nuclear energy is a source of baseload production. We've seen it in Romania. It's independent of weather changes and has sufficient primary resources for a sustainable operation. It is estimated that uranium resources identified worldwide are sufficient to supply existing nuclear power plants, as well as stimulate the construction of new power plants for more than 120 years from now. Also, nuclear power plants can operate according to a flexible hybrid model in combination with renewable resources, as we've seen. So we can have a very clean base load offered by nuclear, and then peak supplied by solar or wind. And the same very nuclear field offers long-term development prospects through the commissioning of small modular reactors and of advanced generation 4 reactors, which Romania is interested in, and which it develops right now through the Pitești project in Alfred with its own technology. Nuclear power can be used to produce clean hydrogen, which is a key element for the decarbonization of the other industrial sectors. And we've seen that the rate of efficiency in nuclear-driven electrolysis has the best economic rate of return in terms of producing liquid hydrogen or gaseous, however you want to do it. So it can play a very big role, and also the gas emitted can be used, as we've seen, for urban heating, seawater desalinization, and these are projects that are currently being implemented successfully all over the world. In Romania, the nuclear power plant in Cernavodă provides heating for more than 60% of the inhabitants of the town of Cernavodă, for example. Without investments, it is estimated that more than 2/3 of the nuclear capacities in advanced economies will be closed, unfortunately, by 2040, which will lead to an increase by $1.6 trillion worldwide of the cost of transitioning to a sustainable, carbon emission-free energy sector. So I think nuclear plays a pretty big role in the decarbonization and in supporting the achievement of the current targets, unless closing it will add an extra burden. So I really expect that the Joint Research Center and the two groups of experts set up at the EU level for the assessment of nuclear energy to give the nuclear sector the position it deserves. And hopefully thus we'll be able to provide another support pillar for the energy trilemma within further conferences of the World Energy Council. Thank you.